There we go. So welcome everybody to the 2022 general election candidate information session. My name is Heather Nelson-Smith and I'm the CAO for the District of Port Hardy. And I am here to kind of guide you through what it's like to be a councillor and run for local office. So thanks everybody for coming. And I'm glad that everybody was able to show up this evening. So I have a slideshow that has a couple of videos in there as well as some information, but basically if you're thinking about running for local office, some of the things that you might be kind of thinking about is like, why am I running? There's lots of different reasons why people run. What are the trends affecting council members? What are the roles of council and staff? How does council make decisions? Where does council decision making even start? Where and how can I build constructive staff council public partnerships? And what can go wrong and what can help? So I'm going to guide you through that a little bit through this presentation. And of course, there's some materials that are available on our website to kind of answer any of those questions that we might miss. There's a great handout on what it's like to be a councillor, why are you running for office? And of course, there's a whole series of videos, which you'll see a few of them. Just to kind of give you an idea of some of the resources that are on our website. This is a screenshot on the left-hand side of our website currently, and the other side of the resource materials, which you can also find either in your handout package or directly online. We've also got a countdown. It's currently 43 days until the next general election. So as of September the 1st, we got 43 days to go. This here is a video that's comprised, so there's a series of videos and I've got a couple within the presentation. This one is talking about advice for people that are thinking about running for local office, so I will just let it take off.
What's one piece of advice that you would like to leave to anyone that's considering running for office?
I would say, for me, the things that made it worthwhile is I absolutely love where I live. I absolutely love where I live. And if you love where you live and you're compelled to be involved somehow, there's so many ways to be involved and they're all worthwhile. But if you're in between those things where you love where you live, you have energy to give, and you're looking for a new way to contribute, consider this one.
My best advice if you're considering running for office is go and meet the elected officials in your community or in another neighboring community and really start to understand what their days look like, what their weeks look like. In my community, counselors have to work in another job. And then this is on top of that. And then they have family commitments. So really, you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. And if you haven't started attending council meetings, or looking through the agendas and how long they are, your job is to come to those meetings prepared. You, as Gladys says, you have the ability to be part of really important decisions for the community that you love. And so you better start off on the right foot and get to know the job before you run for the job. And I know elected officials across this province would be happy to share their experiences with candidates interested in running.
Adding to that, I would say for people that are considering running to look at their resilience skills. It is important for one to know what your limits are. And we had earlier about, Tyler mentioned that he has thick skin. But do you have to have thick skin, or should you have that porous skin so you can allow yourself to feel and allow yourself to communicate that when it's overwhelming and when people are pushing your limits in order to say, look here, this is where I am and this is how I feel. So it's important for people to stop and say, how much can I take and what are my resilience skills? So that when you step in, you're going in with your mind, with your eyes open and with your mind open.
In my experience, and this is something I always try to remind myself and I encourage people running for office or anyone that asks really, to remind yourself that just about every single person that you encounter, including your fellow colleagues, wants their community to be a better place than it is now. So there is always commonality in that. You know, you may disagree on what that path forward looks like, but if you can all remember that's your starting point, I think you realize that you have an entire population that all has the exact same intention, and that's an important place to start off any conversation.
So one other thing that I would like to highlight is navigating social media and doing it with a high level of decorum. Because the reality is that it is part of the political landscape. So for better, for worse, being able to use it appropriately is really key, whether you're running for office or whether you've been elected. So before you run, take time to understand the election advertising rules around social media and online ads. And then once you've been elected, find out if your local government has a social media policy and align your use to that policy. So you can also find more information about running for elected office at the site below, including links to the candidate's guide and videos about what you can expect as an elected official.
If I can switch through. So some of the reasons not to run for council. So you're mad as heck at the incumbents. That's typically what happens in a lot of communities, is you'll see a mass exodus of new people that come in. So that's, you know, it for better or for worse, you know, as long as you're in it with what they were saying with the intention. You have one project, you know, kind of in mind that you want to have done while you're on council. You need the money. So I'll get to a slide where we talk about money. It's not that much. You think government can run just like a business. That's one that I hear quite regularly, that, you know, we do move a little slower. It's not because we want to, it's because that's just the way that the nature of the beast is. You think a counselor's job is easy. I can tell you that a counselor's job is not easy. Even just think about social media and what counselors are having to deal with in terms of the public perception and expectation. And you think that it'll help your business. So conflict of interest rules would apply in there, which means that you would end up having to leave the room every time something about your business is being discussed. So what do we do here? With council, it does have a job description. I use air quotes with this respect. Mayors and councillors, board members are expected to contribute to the betterment of their community and their local government, provide leadership to serve and act on behalf of all of the citizens of the community. Now, that doesn't mean that not everything is going to make everybody happy, but it does mean that we act collectively for all of the citizens of the community. The trends that are currently affecting local government officials, local elected officials, and like I said in that video, there is a bit of a touch on social media. There is quite a few community leaders that are struggling with a lot of the expectations on social media. So that's one of the trends for sure. And I don't have a slide for it, but it is one thing that comes up. The public demand for open and transparent government. I think that in Port Hardy, we can, I can safely say that we are really open and transparent. We try to provide as much information to the public as we possibly can. We don't do a lot of in-camera meetings. And when we do in-camera meetings, as soon as we're able to release the information, we provide it. But, you know, we do need to keep striving to ensure that we continue to have open and transparent government. The increase for pressure for responsiveness. And this comes from a, you know, a culture as well, where, you know, you send an email and you get an instant response, or you put out a text message and there's an instant response. So it's just the way that the nature of the beast is going with respect to communications as a whole. And there is an increased pressure for responsiveness. And that also applies to things like, you know, a sewer line break or a road pothole, or even things with respect to like bylaws that need to be enacted. There is that increased pressure. And then, of course, there's the increased visibility and scrutiny on elected officials, more and more, especially, you know, and I keep going back to it, but with the internet and the access to people being more readily available, it definitely opens up that lens for increased visibility and scrutiny of elected officials. But then again, it also helps to kind of get rid of that issue with transparency as well. So this one's kind of one of those ones that's a plus minus. And of course, increased public expectations for services, which when we get to the next slide, you'll see that nobody wants to pay more taxes. So there's always those struggles that we're having to deal with as councillors. you as counselors and myself as staff, because we're trying to also manage the same expectations. And then we also have the increase in downloading, which this is a big one. And, you know, one of the complaints that I'm hearing regularly is the, you know, the social issues that are occurring around the community and the housing situation. And of course, as local governments, that's not really our purview for dealing with, but because we are the closest form of government that people have access to, this typically will fall down onto us to have to take on that responsibility. But it's also other things like grant writing, grant reporting, services that the ministries had provided in the past being passed on to local governments, and our capacity isn't getting any greater. So those are some issues. And then of course, aging infrastructure, resources, and future asset replacement. This one's a major one for all communities across BC with respect to asset management, because asset management, tangible capital assets, wasn't required as something that had to be accounted for in your accounting functions until 2009. So we're already well behind. This is the legislation that governs the councils. And so I did bring the books with me. So we have the Community Charter, which governs the purposes and powers and governance of municipalities. And then you have the Local Government Act, which covers regional districts, incorporations and amalgamations, but it also covers off on land use and planning and zoning, as well as elections and referenda. So quite often we automatically go straight to the Community Charter, but there are still quite a few Local Government Act regulations that we have to turn to in order to govern ourselves. In addition, there's a multitude of other Interpretation Act, the BC Assessment Act, the Land Act, et cetera, that also we refer to. So we'll talk a little bit about roles, and I've got a nice little pictogram here of people canoeing, and hopefully we're all canoeing in the right direction, obviously. So with council, you know, one of the things we have to understand too is that when you refer to mayor and council, it's actually a council. The mayor is the figurehead of the council, but still has all of the same powers of a council. So the council and the mayor are the collective council members. You've got council is the governing body. So even when we're voting at the table, the mayor still has a vote at the table. Representing the electors collectively, you engage with the community. We act within the confines of the Community Charter and the Local Government Act. We set the direction of the community, set the priorities of the corporation, oversee the budget and process and associate and allocate the resources, decide which services and how much, which and how much will be delivered, not necessarily the how it's done, but the kind of that overarching. That's what staff do, is we kind of implement what the policies are. Represent the issue of individual citizens, monitor the satisfaction levels of the community, which councillors will be the first people to hear if there's any dissatisfaction, and hire and oversee and evaluate the chief administrative officer. So the chief administrative officer is the one employee of the council. And then the mayor you've got is the political leader, and you know, typically they're the head of the organization. They're the key spokesperson, and they're also the chair of the council meetings. They have a ceremonial role as well, so that's when they will do things like cut ribbons and do blessings, appoint council committees, liaise with the chief administrative officer, liaise with the public and media, and represent the district within other governments, so the regional district or the province. Represents the district with other governments. Apparently, I think that that's really important, so I put it there twice. Consensus builder and facilitates council decision making, and basically everything on the previous slide, as I already mentioned. And the consensus builder is the big one. That's the importance of the chair, that function. It is trying to find the answer at the end of the day, so decision making can happen. So then you've got the CAO and staff. So that's me and all of the people that work for the district. So as the chief administrative officer, I provide the leadership to the staff. I communicate council policy and direction to the staff and the public and the media, and I'm also accountable directly to council. Then collectively, we work together and we provide information to council, we provide professional advice to council, we implement council's policies and direction, we recognize and respect the decision-making role. We communicate council policy and decisions to the public, we alert council to other problems and anything else in between. We like to maintain a good open relationship with council and keep them informed through regular weekly updates, which we do online. we'll provide that information as well, and then we'll do staff reports that come to council meetings and committee meetings. So this is the commitment. So we did a bit of research on time. And so in 2021, we had 20 regular council meetings, 20 committee of the whole meetings, 13 in-camera meetings, 5 finance meetings, 5 standing committees, which meet every month or every 2 months. And then we also have other organizations that mayor and council sit on, including the regional district, the Mount Waddington Hospital District, Vancouver Island Regional Library, seniors, and the list goes on. There's BINWAG, tourism advisory committees, etc. Lots of things in the region going on. And then, of course, remuneration, this is the big one, and I touched on that a little bit. It's not a huge amount of pay. So the mayor is about $29,000 and a councillor is about $14,000. Now, we do cover expenses to travel on business of the district, and we also provide accidental death and dismemberment insurance for each of the councillors as well. This is a big one that's come forward. So in the past 8 years, the Working Group for Responsible Conduct, which was headed up by UBCM, Local Government Management Association, as well as the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, has been working on the responsible conduct for elected officials. And one of the things that changed this year, and it is incorporated in the community charter, is there is a requirement now that all councils have to have a code of conduct policy, which wasn't a requirement before. It was a optional item that councils could bring forward. And within the district of Port Hardy, we opted for, this council opted for that prior to it being properly legislated. So we'll just have a little.
My first question to you is, what does responsible conduct mean to you?
Yeah, I agree that responsible conduct can be interpreted in so many ways, but in short form, it means everyone is able to be themselves. It means creating that safe and brave space. And the difference being that in a brave space, the person who is stepping in is able to not cover themselves, but to show up. And also it means, providing that freedom of ideas to be free falling. We all have creative minds, and we all come to the council table with different ideas. But if one person shows up and they have to hold back from any thought just because they fear what everyone is going to say, then that space is not a safe space or a brave space.
I think just showing up, being open, when we're working as a council team, trying to make sure, as you just did, that everybody has space to say what they're going to say, and then trying to hold each of us accountable to saying what you have to say and not running roughshod over others, and trying to find a way that everyone gets to contribute, all ideas are heard, and that by the end of the meeting, everyone's feeling at least they contributed to the best of their ability and they got, what they view as really important on the table. And then we had this discussion not that long ago, remembering once the decision is made, we all own the decision and we take that forward.
Responsible conduct is being responsible and thoughtful for my own words and actions, but making sure that the group understands that they're responsible for the quality of the decision, the quality of the debate. And that's really important to me as mayor and someone who chairs a lot of the meetings, is that it's not just my responsibility at the table to make sure the conversation is robust, that everyone has a say, that people are listening. It's everyone at the table's responsibility. And, that's part of good governance. That's part of respect and understanding that, yes, I was elected to the table, but so were these 6 other people. The citizens of my community want to hear what they have to say on these issues. And so it's about making the space, as Trish says, and as Gladys says, to make sure those different voices can be heard and that we're listening. So, and I don't think that good governance or the idea of responsible conduct stops at the council table. I think it's when we're in social media. I think it's when we're out in community at open houses, or just when someone stops you at a coffee shop and wants to talk to you. I think you have to always have that sense of responsible conduct in mind.
you do want to enter the forum with this idea of, being hard on ideas. That's why we are elected, but soft on people. And that sometimes those lines can blur, and that's especially in our roles. I think it's important to always maintain that we don't blur those lines, because we're a microcosm of the community, but also can set an example for how our community goes about conducting its business, the type of spaces that we are creating. Because if we have counselors or directors that don't feel comfortable in those spaces, then how can we ask the community to come and be comfortable in that space or express themselves, and hear from them and in ways that are respectful to council, to the community as a whole, and ultimately to the staffing body as well.
And I actually think responsible conduct starts during the campaign, and how you conduct yourself during the campaign says a lot about who you are and how you see leadership. And so to me personally, it is reaching out when you're at all candidates debates and out there in the community to understand the other candidates as people, who they are, what is their work, do they have family, where, what is their background, and trying to humanize, people before you just see them through their political lens. And I think that's really important, because the community gets to decide who your team is for 4 years. You don't.
Thank you so much for contributing to.
So sorry, I didn't mean to cut her off so quickly, but we've already seen that part. So anyway, these are the foundational principles of responsible conduct: integrity, respect, accountability, leadership, and collaboration. And within our code of conduct policy, which you'll find online and also in the packages in front of you, those are the 4 key elements, or the 5 key elements, 4 key elements that we're working towards. So we got council decision making, and one of the things that they mentioned in the last video was, once a decision is made, then you kind of have to own it. So, kind of going back to that one topic, possibility that some people might run is, sometimes you run and then that very first meeting, you might end up in a situation where you have a disagreement and council then makes a decision, and you obviously vote against it because that wasn't what you wanted. But you have to remember that we are a continuing body, and council, once they make that decision, that's what we do going forward. And when we talk about council being the continuing body, it also means that any decisions that council made in the past would continue with any future councils until a policy is changed. So you might not like a bylaw that was enacted in the last term. It means that bylaw still continues until that bylaw can be changed collectively by the council. And so that's the rules in place. And get informed about the budget realities. That's a big one. Like we said, we don't want to raise taxes, but there's still competing priorities in which to put information or put money into. And so those are just some things that council has to definitely deal with. And of course, ask questions and don't assume the story you hear on the street. That's one of the things that I've definitely noticed is, it's a telephone game. Everybody knows the telephone game happens. This person tells this person tells this person. By the time it gets to the 10th person, it's completely, you never know what the right answer might be. And strategic planning. So we do have a strategic plan for the district, which runs until the end of this year. It's a living document, can be changed at any time. We will be heading into more strategic planning once this election is over. And it's important to also understand too that priority setting is saying yes, but it also means having to say no. So it's trying to juggle all of those priorities. And I don't want to scare anybody, because it's actually not that scary. It's just that, sometimes when you might be new and you're not really sure, you want to say yes to everything, but you have to realize that it's the best thing to do is to take it all into focus and prioritize and plan out what needs to get done. Working together to better together. So council staff and the public partnership. So we try to all work together, council staff, and we work together to try and provide the same information to the public. And so it means, quality orientation of information and advice for council members, and providing that information in advance so that council can make good informed decision making, respect for the democratic process and principles, joint planning sessions. And when I talk about joint planning sessions, that could be committee meetings, it could be open houses with the public, it could be, having just, one-on-one conversations with people on the street. Understanding that walking a mile in other people's shoes, everybody has a different perspective. And I think a lot of us always say we're always in the same boat, right? But we're actually not in the same boat. We're in the same storm and we're all in different kinds of boats. And so it's understanding that the person who's in the kayak or the dinghy or the floaty tube or the yacht all have different perspectives on what's happening within that storm. So trying to kind of put that lens on understanding other people. Staff briefing sessions, we do a lot of this through senior management in order to be able to provide the information from council and the public that we're hearing so that our senior staff can disseminate that information to their staff. We do a lot of corporate planning, communication of council and the rationale for decisions. That's another one. And that's where, you know, we're putting those videos out online so that people can watch council in the decision-making process and see how they landed at a decision. Because while we record, you know, some highlights, for instance, in a committee meeting, we don't do that at a council level because once a decision is made, that's the decision. The motion is the decision. How we got there sometimes gets forgotten because that's not, doesn't make up part of the decision making. The decision is the final decision. But it's great to have an opportunity to watch the video and watch that debate going back and forth. And there's things that can go wrong. And, you know, I've been very fortunate that this has not happened very much in the last 7 years since I've been here in Port Hardy. So lack of trust in staff, lack of respect for the role of council as the voice of the community. And that's the back and forth, because that could also come from staff to council. That could come from the public to council. It could come from council to council as well, right? Not understanding the role. Lack of leadership from the mayor, a lack of leadership from the CAO, poor mayor-CAO relationship. That's when you'll read about in the papers quite regularly. Poor staff, council communication, a lack of understanding of the council members' role, a lack of understanding of the different roles of council and staff and how we work together, and poor conflict resolution skills and overly close working relationships between council and staff, and a win-lose culture. Those are some things that can't go wrong. And I believe that this is the last video.
We're going to change gears a little bit, and we've touched into the role of conflict. And I want to talk about what is productive conflict look like and what does unproductive conflict look like.
I think evidence of unhealthy conflict is when, you know, I'll think about it just at the table, at the council table. And fortunately, I've seen very little of this, is that when someone is so compelled with their own idea, they're not interested in an opposing side, or perhaps they're coming in to represent some group above all, when personal issues come in, when perhaps there's a lot of pressure on someone to represent folks, when it's just, when you're coming in, you know, with that pit in your stomach or your heart's not in the right place, and it's like, I gotta get this, you know, damn the torpedoes, like this has got to happen.
Unhealthy conflict to me is when people become subjective instead of being objective. The second one is the fact that we all need to have, you know, that emotional intelligence whereby you look and you check your own biases, and then you listen to the other perspectives. And I often do this little exercise when I find myself listening to respond rather than listening to listen. I check myself and I say, why do I want to respond so quickly? Step back and listen. That gives you the time to process and then be objective and really speak when you come down.
I think unproductive conflict really is when it's not centered, whether intentionally or known or not known, it's not centered on a better outcome or product. It becomes about something else. And so that might be the desire to be right, by the desire to win, you know, whatever that means. And I think it can happen, especially as Trish said, on items that are really like subjectively important to us. That's probably when we actually have to make more of an effort to make sure our intentions are pure and that we have an open mind, just so we can respect the dialogue.
So part of that healthy conflict is allowing people to lean into the discomfort. If you're not getting comfortable, if you're comfortable all the time, then there might be some aspects of coddling that's there. right? And coddling is not healthy for anyone. We do need to bring in topics that make us uncomfortable, and we all need to be challenged, in our perspectives and in our thinking. That's what brings in that innovation and that creativity in our thoughts. And ultimately, our citizens want us really to look at things holistically so that we can own that decision when it comes.
And I think, that is a really important piece. And I think Trish has articulated it with the brave space and how we have respectful dialogue, because we don't actually want to mute emotion. So if someone feels very passionate about something, that's actually okay. It doesn't have to be coupled with anything derogatory to other people at the table, but to bring that passion to the table, this is something really important. But I think, figuring out the difference between the idea, forceful, passionate, but not getting to the point where it becomes personal. I think that's amazing. And I think that brave space and sticking with the idea and encouraging people to bring their passion to the table, but coupled with our good manners.
I sort of was reflecting there, if maybe conflict is the wrong word. Like, I think maybe what we want at the council table in conversation is actually tension, right? There's a tension of there that can be resolved through dialogue. I think if it enters the realm of conflict, maybe that tension has gone too far. So it definitely isn't healthy, I think, if you have no tension or no real disagreements. Something is wrong. What the source of that may be, I think that's would be different in any given situation, but something isn't working the way it should be in a democracy if it's always agreement. Maybe arguably the community didn't represent or didn't vote in a great enough diversity and to represent the community well to find that tension because I truly believe, it's a core belief of mine that tension on those ideas with more voices included will lead to a better outcome that represents the community better.
I think this is where the connection between responsible conduct and building up more diverse local governments are connected, Tyler, because if we can't model safer spaces for a diversity of voices, whether they're female voices, people from the BIPOC community, younger voices, then we're going to keep getting what we're getting. And I think it's true. Sometimes some of the voices that need to create that tension actually aren't at the table. They're just missing because of who runs for council and who gets elected. And I think, to me, that's one of the fundamental pieces of our job in demonstrating responsible conduct, is to show that more diverse candidates that might be considering running for government, that it can be done differently.
As you
There you go. So yeah, I guess what can help too is just kind of feeding off of what they were talking about in the video is, understanding the role, taking advantage of quality orientation and training. So the district also supports that as well, of all of our elected officials, supporting corporate strategic planning, staying focused, communicating well and frequently. That's a main one, because I find that that's where, there's a lot of breakdown is just in the communication. Be sensitive to the 4-year election cycle. Everything takes longer than you think. So having a realistic expectation of what's going on, recognize that council members operate in a world of perception and compromise. Diversity is our strength, and respecting the democratic process. And so, interestingly, when the mayor from Squamish was talking about the fact that the community chooses who the team is going to be, right? So just recognizing that's why people were elected. And so just some additional resources just to kind of cap it all off. George Cuff is used to be in municipal government, and now he's retired, but now he writes literature. There's a couple of pieces of literature that I've included in your packages. From George Cuff on being elected. There's being elected part 1 and part 2. They're one simple page, which kind of just outlines a few things. He also writes for Municipal World, so there's some great articles in there that kind of cover off on all of this. And then I've also included in the package the handbook for mayors and councils that was written by a lawyer. And basically what it does is it takes the community charter and simplifies it a little bit so that it's a little easier for council to understand their roles and responsibilities. Because if you read the community charter, all the power to you. You're not paid to read the community charter, so it's easier to find handbooks that help you through that. So, and then in your packages as well, I've included the annual report for the District of Port Hardy, which includes our strategic plan, and then a bunch of other resources to kind of help you and guide you. If you're watching this online, I will put all the resources in the just below the video, and you'll be able to click on them and download them at your leisure. And with that, I'm going to conclude. Thank you.